Good to have you all here. Welcome for this wonderful discussion. We have a friend of Sage in the house today, Dr. Molefi Kete Asante. I feel extremely privileged to be able to have this discussion with Dr. Asante because specifically, 1 year ago, my daughter was just born and Dr. Asante was speaking for Black History Month last year, but I was out of the office, I was on leave, and so he was in the DC office. And I was able to watch the recording, but I was like, man, there was such energy in that room with Dr. Asante and Dr. Ayo Sakai of UWP Books. And so it's just wonderful to not only I get to be here, but I get to have this discussion with him. And, we are really gonna talk today a little bit about Being Human Being, his book, and about, Dr. Asante is the founder of the Journal of Black Studies here at Sage, and known as the founder of afrocentricity itself. So we'll be having some discussions about that, what it means to be now and what it means to the future, and really having the discussion that this is a book about Africans, this is a book about Black people, but the big takeaway is that this is a book, while it's about Black people, it's a book for everyone. Like, it is a book that when you read it, it allows you to understand how we are all really in this together. And so with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Blaze to say a few words, and then we will get into the discussion. So.
So there's a great story about my good friend Molefi and how he met Sarah and how he launched the journal. And I hope maybe at the end of the program you'll share that story because I really enjoy it. But how did I get to know Dr. Asante Molefi? So some of you know, I think, I started at Sage as a production editor. And back in the day, right, I hate to say this is pre-computer. Sorry, but it's true. And so what you did, and then every production editor had books and journals. And they moved around the company in these big cardboard boxes. And there were different copies of the manuscript, and then it would get typeset, right? And the manuscript, when you typeset, it would come out in these long strips, and then someone had to cut the strips into pages, and then sort of paste them on a thin piece of cardboard, and that was each page. And one of the people who did that was Herman. Am I making this up, Herman? We were both a lot younger then, and so, yeah. So I got it right. The type came out, you used an X-Acto knife, you cut it, then you fed it through a wax machine, and then you, right? Anything you want to add to that, Herman? No? Anything you want to add to that? Did I miss any of the...
It was fun, cut a few fingertips.
Yeah. So then these boxes would come up, and then we would photocopy them. And then there was this amazing new company that delivered things in 24 hours. It was called FedEx. Actually, it was called Federal Express. And then that photocopy of the next issue of the journal would go out to the journal editor, someone like Molefi. And then I would call him. And that's what you did. You called every single editor or every single author on the phone, and just imagine how long it took to flip through each page. So we would proofread it here, and then Molefi would proofread it in his office, and then you'd set up like a 2 to 3 hour phone call. Because I'm serious, this is like before computers. And then we'd get on the phone, and we'd go through page by page, and we'd mark it up, and we'd make corrections, and we send it back to Herman, right? We retypeset those corrections, we paste them down again, and then eventually the journals were printed. But if you spend whatever it is, every 4 weeks or every 8 weeks on the phone with someone for 2 to 3 hours, you sort of get to know each other, right? And you just, speaking of being human, you got to talk to people, right? Right? You have to get to know the people, and so Molefi and I got to know each other really well during those few years, and we became very close. And we stayed in touch my entire time at Sage. And then I left for a few years, and I think maybe we lost touch. I can't really remember if I was good about staying in touch or not. But then I came back to Sage, and Molefi was still here, still very much the powerful leading force in the Journal of Black Studies. But we also did an encyclopedia with you as the guest. It was the encyclopedia of
African religion and also Encyclopedia of Black Studies.
There. So we did 2 encyclopedias. I was feeling bad that I couldn't remember the name, but you were the editor and you couldn't even remember the name. So I'm good. Um, so, so anyway, and so we sort of reestablished or rekindled our friendship and our relationship. I invited Molefi to speak at our 35th anniversary, where he told the story about the founding of the Journal of Black Studies. We have stayed in touch since then. I introduced Molefi to my son when he was at University of Michigan, and Molefi became a mentor to him and helped guide him through some difficult issues, and we have been in touch ever since. In the immediate aftermath of the death of George Floyd, I called Molefi and I said, I need your help, because this is bigger than this one incident in Minneapolis. This is about this company, it's about the future of the world. And so in those first couple of years, Molefi and I had a standing phone call, and it was just to talk about not just the issues that were happening here at SAGE, right, and how to respond to those, but also just issues of race in general. And so many times, I think it was always a Friday morning phone call, many times we would just call and talk about some of the issues of race in this country in general. And so it's been, Molefi, it's been a great friendship for more than 30 years. You've been absolutely wonderful for SAGE. You have changed you created the academic discipline, but you certainly have changed the way millions of college students look at and think about race. And it's just wonderful to have you as part of the SAGE family. So it's great to see you, and thanks for coming out.
Thank you, Blaze. That was excellent. Thank you, Dr. Asante, for being here.
Thank you.
Welcome you all. I will say just a quick reminder to silence your phones during this discussion because we're recording. We'll have a nice polished version that is shared later on here at SAGE. So I just wanted to kind of start by, like I say, again, thanking you for being here and letting you know that in reading the book, Being Human Being, I was really kind of blown away by the way you deconstruct the racial ladder and the hierarchy. And so with that, kind of talking about all the work that you've done, I wanted to start with a question around what's maybe like one of your earliest memories around that would lead you down this road, right, of the research that would be the breadth of your work. What led you into deciding that afrocentricity was your life's work?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I'm just delighted to be here to see so many people. I mean, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've seen this many people together in one place. It's wonderful, and I want to thank Blaze. I want to thank the SAGE family for everything, and certainly Malcolm, you've asked the right question. I think, first of all, just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Georgia. And I was from a family of 16 children. I was number 4. And in fact, I grew up in picking cotton and working in the tobacco fields. That's basically my early existence. So I stretch a long period of time in America's southern history in South Georgia. So what struck me, first of all, was the fact that we were all basically the same people, but that we were not all treated the same way. So I think the very first thing, Malcolm, that happened to me was the experience of trying to, for example, go to the library in my city of Valdosta, Georgia, and not being allowed to go to the library or to enter the library. That was the first thing. I was maybe 13 or 14. So it put me on a road, but I didn't know at the time that I was on a particular road, but it was on a road to try to understand what was this all about. And I didn't know very much. I couldn't know very much at that age, but I recognized, first of all, though, that there was something that was going on that was different from what I understood about humanity. And so I was very much engaged at in early years with the whole question of humanity. And I think that that's the thing that brought me to this whole question in the book. And also with a discussion with Dr. Na Dove, who is the other author of that book, because she came out of a family where her father was Ghanaian and her mother was English. And she was having similar experiences of being a product of that union and having difficulty growing up in England. And that was an issue that also really, when it brought us together to understand this notion of how human beings saw phenotypes as creating difference, and not just difference, but the ranking of differences, you see? And the ranking of differences is the problem in our society, not difference itself. I mean, we are different, and there are many differences among us. And in fact, if you look at the world, there are thousands of millions of phenotypical differences. I mean, we're all different in this room. So there are differences. So, but the problem was not the difference. The problem was the ranking of difference based on certain phenotypes. That became an issue.
Yeah,
Right.
That's amazing. And then kind of going into that, as I was reading the book, I also noticed you're talking about these phenotypes and how they're ranked, and you start to realize reading your book that these racial ideas, and you even reference it, you call it like pseudoscience, were at the very early stages of this, were kind of have made their way into academia. And even though to some degree we've said, oh, well, that was wrong, that work is still cited, still noted, and it kind of the specter of it sometimes lingers in even how we think today. And so how do educational institutions, or how do you see educational institutions and maybe even publishers addressing that, or denouncing that work, or correcting that work? And if so, is it done through afrocentricity, so to address all humans?
It's a very difficult task. I mean, we grow up in a world in which these things are already made for us. It's not like we grow up in a world and then we make these things up and we create these boundaries, or we create these different systems. These systems exist. I mean, when a child is born today, the child is born in the United States of America, for example, you're born in the system, right? So the question becomes, how do we take down what should not be there? That is a big problem, because race, as we all know now in social sciences, we all said, race is an illusion. I mean, there's only one race. It's the human race. And if there's only one race and it's the human race, and yet this construction of race based on phenotypes and also given ranking by virtue of the phenotype, so that the darkest person is at the bottom, and particularly the darkest woman is at the bottom, then the question becomes, how does this happen? Who created this system? What's this system created for? By whom? When in fact, the so-called mother of the earth is the darkest woman. How do we get to that? Of course, we get through science. There's only one race, it's the Homo sapiens. All Homo sapiens, the 8 billion people on the earth today, are actually people who are derived from people from the continent of Africa about 300,000 years ago. That's where we all came from. Our DNA says that. So if our DNA says that we're all Homo sapiens, and Homo sapiens arise in Africa 300,000 years ago, and Homo sapiens never left Africa until 70,000 years ago. That means that almost 3/4 of the time that Homo sapiens have been on the earth was spent in Africa. And then after that, migration out of Africa of some of the Homo sapiens to different parts of the world, even as far as Australia. That's science. So now if that is the science, and we all are derived from this experience of Homo sapiens, where did this notion of race or races enter the picture? And why did it enter the picture? Of course, you know, the Marxists have a very good answer. They said capitalism created it, you see. Very simple. So it is created on the basis of how you distribute wealth. And others say, no, it was even existing in the religious doctrines of different ideologies. It was found, for example, in the so-called texts of Manu. It was found in the Hebrew texts, they say, of the whole story of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It was told in the Islamic texts about Abd and Abdel and Abdul, the servant or the slave, and so forth. These are religious documents, some people say. So these things existed to create the differences, not the differences, to create the ranking of the differences between people. And so when you get the rankings of the differences between people, so that you have, you create it on the basis of, say, Aryan Nordic culture as a top, then away from that, of course, you get down to the discussion of whether or not the people at the bottom are even human. When you talk about the bottom, you're talking about the darkest people, you see. This is true. This is why we have this with the, this is obviously true with the whole discussion, for example, in India, of the Aryan invasion, you see, with the Dravidians, the black people of India, the dark-skinned people, and the creation of a religion that says, okay, if you're a Sudra, you are this, and you're always this. You cannot change until you reincarnated. Or if you are, if it's in a religious context, in the American context, if you're African and you're a black person, then you are in a caste system that cannot be changed, because this is the way, what the Christians say, God has ordained it this way, you see. So these are illusions. This is not real. That's why being a human being, as we say in the book, is that what we look at is the idea that all of us are Homo sapiens. And if we're all Homo sapiens, how do we get rid of this notion, these notions that create these rankings? I call it the racial ladder. The racial ladder. The racial ladder means that I live in Philadelphia. Anna and I came here from Philadelphia, right? So when you're in Philadelphia, we know quite well, if you hear that something happened in North Philadelphia, we pretty much know that, well, North Philadelphia is where there's a concentration of African Americans, right? If it happens in South Philadelphia, there was a concentration of Italians. And I tell you this, that the police in Philadelphia know in their own minds, because of these illusions, they have certain sort of predilections about the differences in those different areas of the city. And those are the problems. And so some people say, well, to fight this, we talk about individualism and individualistic ways of responding as individuals. But in a society where we have pluralism and a multicultural population, we have a whole different possibility. And that possibility has to be that we're all human beings, you see.
That's great, yeah. As a follow-up to that, how do you respond to, you know, the person that says, well, this is all great, Dr. Asante, what you're saying, that was all in the past. I'm not racist. I understand that, you know, racism worked that way then. But when I look around today, I see we've had a black president. I see that there's a lot of black, you know, stars and people making decent money. How does that apply? You know, why I don't see racism at work today, or I don't see that system or that racial ladder at work today. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think that what happens is that the racial ladder in our society, unfortunately, works too often. Even when you have a black president, doesn't mean that racism does not exist, you see? And racism can exist without the notion of race. This is another thing that's very strange. Race can be an illusion, and it could be false from a biological point of view, but nevertheless, racism exists because it's a system that is set up to structure certain things. So in the case of Obama, well, what happens? Obama is president, and then you get a backlash or whitelash, where people say, okay, wait a minute. How did this guy get to be president? You know, we can't let this happen again. And of course, there are stories about that there were a group of people who met. Once the election happened, they met and said, oh, no, we cannot allow this to happen again in the United States of America, you see? So what is that about if it's not about racism? Yes, it's about racism, because racism can exist, particularly if you have in your mind that the racial ladder is being destroyed. You say, wait a minute, we have to change this structure and to maintain the power relationship that we have created, we have to change the structure, you see? So no, here's what I do believe. I believe that the more educated people get, the more people see that we're all human. And so yes, there are differences now in terms of how people react, some people, but the system, because it exists, still generates. So yes, we win on one level, on one hand, and on the other hand, it's taken away from us because we're creating also racists on the other hand. You see,
Yeah.
So there are differences, and let's hope that ultimately there will be more changes for the positive than for the negative.
That makes me think of a statement, and I don't know who said, I can't put my finger on it, and I'm probably paraphrasing here, but the idea that those who put the structures of racism in place did so that people today did not have to be racist, right?
Absolutely.
So you don't have to be racist for those structures to work. So that seems like what you're
Absolutely, and that Dr. Nadav calls it the puppets and the puppeteers. The puppeteers have already set up the system, and the puppets just carry it out.
Right. Well, we've been starting to have a lot of conversation, especially within publishing, around artificial intelligence. And a lot of times when you bring that up, people go, well, what does that have to do with race? And we're starting to see that there are sources that cite that these algorithms that are creating this are the algorithm is created by information that's already out there or information that's fed to it. And if that information is biased or could even be false, then you get a skewed outcome. And so, for example, one example was an AI that was created to read pedestrians on the street so that they don't get hit by cars, but is not programmed to read dark-skinned people, therefore leaving them open to, or not a facial recognition that is recognizing darker-skinned people or people with certain phenotypes as the same person. You know, I kind of wonder what do you think about the way we're advancing technology and where that information that is being used in a racial sense? How would you, I guess, how would you maybe speak to how afrocentricity or what we're talking about needs to be a part of that conversation? Because a lot of people say we don't really need this DI conversation, but it seems to be, even through the technology, we're seeing the issues start to crop up.
Yeah. Technology is wonderful, of course, but certainly technology doesn't necessarily change the structures that have been created in terms of the algorithms, in terms of how people have already designed them and programmed them. One of the good things that we know is that people like the young man John Passmore and his idea with the Latimer Company is extremely important, because what Latimer is trying to do is to say, well, we've got to program, we've got to create new algorithms that are based on information that comes from African American history and culture, African history and culture and knowledge and so on. And there are many examples that are given. If you look up, for example, a term on Google Chat GPT to say, write me an article about Onesimus, they will write you an article about a Greek person, you see. but coming out of Greek mythology. But if you really have programmed information about Onesimus, who was a doctor in Boston in the 17th century and 18th century, who actually helped to save the city from a smallpox outbreak, you will discover that Onesimus was a black man who came from Africa with knowledge about how to vaccinate and inoculate rather people for diseases. But if you don't have that information about Onesimus from Boston, you will have a Greek Onesimus. So part of what has to happen is that the information, particularly, let's say like Sage produced the Journal of Black Studies that has done so for 54, 55 years. There's enough information in the Journal of Black Studies to help any company that wants to have information about different social aspects of life to be programmed so that you can create a whole different algorithm about information, you see, that's out there. So part of it is to use the information that already exists, but perhaps is not really currently primary information for most people, because that, it's available.
Well, yeah. So it's making sure that information is loaded, making sure that information is a part of it.
We have to do that, because if we don't do that, then we continue the system that we already have inherited.
Absolutely. That's wonderful in terms of the insight behind it. One of the things that, kind of not trying to pivot too much, but quickly be here before, because I do want to be able to take some questions from our audience. I wanted to ask you about, when reading this book, you can really tell that there is, you have a real understanding and a love for people, and you're trying to tell people that if we really got rid of this, we would all literally just, and it seems so simple, but the way you do it and the way you deconstruct it, it shows how much history is behind where we're at. And so what do you say to, how do you respond to, I've noticed you have some critics who argue that this new Molefi Asante, this new look of humanism over afrocentricity or africology could be a detraction from those core principles. What would you say to them?
Well, actually, that means that they never understood Afrocentricity.
Right.
That's right. And it's true, they never understood Afrocentricity. Because Afrocentricity was not, and I said it many times, that Afrocentricity was not a political idea, and that it was not an idea of black nationalism. I said this so many times in the 1980s, because I had many arguments about that Afrocentricity was not about black nationalism. It was not even about Afrocentricity being something that was counter to Eurocentricity. What it was always the desire to create a notion about human dignity that was actually something that transcended the whole notion of the racial construction. That was the very beginning, and it was because in my early life, and this is a revelation here. I may regret this by saying this, but as a boy preacher, I was a boy preacher from the time I was 11 to the time I was about 17. From a boy preacher, one of the things in my early life was, and they at that time we didn't have the sensitivity that we needed to have about gender. So people used to say, in the black church in the South, we used to say, well, we have to believe in the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God. That was the black thing. That was the thing that black people talked about. The brotherhood of all men and the fatherhood of God. My father drilled that home. That is the thing, that all human beings we're all the same, and that God is our Father. Right. Well, I mean, of course, we now say that we're all siblings, and that if you take the notion of a divinity, then whatever that divinity is a divinity for everybody. But here's the thing that I think was very, very much a real part of my own construction about the whole notion, and that was that one thing brought us together, and that was human dignity, and the fight for human dignity. You see, there is a story. If I have 1 minute to say this story, in around 29, maybe 28, 2700 BC, you get the building of the first pyramid. And the person who built the first pyramid was very, very much known as Khufu. Khufu was this person. He was the king, but the builder was Imhotep. But Khufu, the king, and if you go to Egypt even now, you find the pyramids at Giza, and one of them is named for Khufu. It's called, in Greek they call it Cheops, the pyramid of Cheops, whereas Khufu was the African name. Well, Khufu was a great king. And one day, a servant came and said to Khufu, Khufu, we have somebody in this kingdom who actually can sever a man's head from his body and put it back together. And Khufu said, well, who is that man? They said, his name is Jeti. He said, well, go bring me Jeti. Bring Jeti to me. I want to see this for myself. So they went and they got Jeti, and they brought Jeti before Khufu, and they said to Khufu, here's the man who can do this. And the man was asked by Khufu, can you really do this? Can you cut a person's head off and then put it back together and the man lived? He said, yes, I can do this. I can do this. So the king said, I'm not sure you can do this. So he said, look, go bring me that prisoner who's been in prison for 3 years. Bring that prisoner to me. I want to see this demonstration myself. Bring the prisoner and bring Jeti here, and we will see this. And so when they brought the prisoner before the king and to Jeti, then the king said, okay, Jeti, he's all yours. This is the prisoner. Cut his head off and then put it back together, right? And Jeti looked at the king. He says, my lord, but even a prisoner is a human being. And I can't do this. I can't do this. I can do it, but I cannot do this. Because even a prisoner, the lowest of the people in your kingdom, is a human. That's the beginning of the question in human history of human dignity, the dignity of human life, even a prisoner, you see? So I think that where we go in terms of even Afrocentricity is this idea that human dignity is at the key, is the center of it. And it's always been at the center of my construction of Afrocentricity. It has not been anything other than human dignity, you see. And I've seen that throughout my life and throughout the world.
So, great answer, and it shines through, in everything that you say and that you do. This has been really wonderful so far, and I just want to give an opportunity, because I could continue to ask you questions. I probably have another 3 or 4, but I wonder if there are a couple of questions from anyone in the audience right now. If so, we could take those. Craig could walk around if there is any. Nope. No, No questions right now? Oh, sounds here.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Here we go.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you, Dr. Asante. I was wondering, do you miss preaching?
Oh, no. That's a good question. Do I miss it? No, I don't. I'm sorry. Oh, boy. I don't know. No, I don't miss it. That's a great. I never. After you speak a lot, and you've heard almost every question, because somebody will ask the same question, but I have never been asked that question. That is one question I've never been asked. No, I don't. I don't miss it. That's good.
Does as a follow-up to that, does the deconstructing, I imagine in all the research you do, you start to see how in different cultures and religions, also how religion can also be used to create these racial divides.
It's a problem.
Does that affect?
It's a major problem for me. Yeah, it's a major problem for me. I mean, to be quite frank with you, is that I am a free thinker, and as a free thinker, I have real problems with the construction of anything that puts other people outside. I cannot see that. I don't see that. We're all human beings. And we have different rituals for spirituality, for how we create. To me, the divinity, and I don't say it in this book, but in another book, I talk about divinity as being creativity. The closest you can get to the concept of the divine is to be creative. What do we say that God did? God created. What do human beings do to be divine? You create. You think, you imagine, you create. And you don't necessarily, this notion of creativity is divinity. That is the notion of it. That's what you do, creativity. And you approach all that way, things become, different for you. But so I don't question people's religions, though. I don't question people's religion, because I understand that there are people who are deeply affected by that, and they need to be. And some people need it more than others. But it is okay, and that's fine. I don't make a difference because people are religious or not religious, but just for me, it doesn't work for me.
And I don't ask that question to be critical of religion, because I actually find that I have faith and I've grown up in a faithful household. And but at the same time, I've also seen that paradigm of like where I grew up in my neighborhoods, on every corner there's either a liquor store. There's something to be said. There's a liquor store and a church.
Oh, church, right.
And to that idea of growing up and being in Sunday school, and they put up the little fuzzy characters from the Bible, and they're all like this one color. They don't look like any of the kids in the room, right?
That's
and then
right.
that you talk in the book about the white Jesus, and so it's not that the idea of the Christ is wrong, but the way it's being used, you can tell it's manipulative in that regard.
Yeah, it's a structure. It's a system, and it's that. But the question that is asked, and that I often ask when I'm even when I travel on the continent of Africa, I ask the people, what existed here before there were Christians and before there were Muslims in your society? What existed? What did the people believe? What did they think? What did the people who lived 100,000 years ago in this place, the native people in California, the Chumas, what did the Chumas who lived here in this region of California, what did they think? Who were there? What was there? They had rituals too. They had spiritual reactions, and they had awe and excellence. And who are these people? Where are those people? Where are they in our minds, in our imaginations? We can never be so small in our own thinking that we think that we are the only ones who have this particular insight. They saw the sun set and the sun rise thousands of times before we were ever here. you know. So this is so the beauty we see, they saw. So I have to always fall back to Homo sapiens. We're all Homo sapiens, and Homo sapiens have seen everything. You know, only and we are the ones who are here. The 8 billion of us who are here, Homo sapiens. We're the only ones who are here.
Molefi, you had here at Sage, we're all dedicated in one way or another to education. And we all do believe that education will change lives. And you have a unique story about a unique educational opportunity that you had as a young man that took you from cotton and tobacco to an academic career and why you're sitting here today. I think it would be great if you could share that with everyone, because it is truly how education changed your life.
Okay. Wow. Well, I think our time will not allow me to go through this whole story, but I'll go through as much as I could possibly do. Yes. By the way, my education was from Georgia to Tennessee to Texas to California, and I got my doctorate from UCLA, so I just went that way. Okay, so part of that experience was that truly my world got larger and larger as I moved further and further west. I mean, really, that was basically what it was. But the time at the one interesting thing that happened to me was that while I was, and I'm skipping a lot just to compress it, is that when I was at UCLA in the late 60s. And the late 60s was a time of great ferment. That's when we had the whole Black Studies revolution. In 1966, you remember that at San Francisco State, they started the first Black Studies department. At UCLA, and I graduated in 1968 at UCLA, and I went away to Purdue for 1 year. And when I came back to UCLA to teach, and as the director of the Center for African American Studies. And at that time, we had an acting director, a gentleman named Bob Singleton, and he was getting a degree in economics. And so we hatched this idea that we needed a journal of Black Studies. And it was at that time that we went over to Beverly Hills. At the time, Sage was in Beverly Hills, went over to Beverly Hills to talk to Sarah and George McCune. And we went there with the idea that we would love to create a journal. We wanted a journal that Sage would pay for. Sage would do all the marketing, advertising, and everything. And we would just be the editors, and and they would not interfere with us doing our editorial thing. And it was wonderful because Sarah agreed to it and said, we will do this. And that's how Journal of Black Studies started. Now, when the Journal of Black Studies started, most of the people who were talking about what was happening called it Black Studies. And that's why the journal was named Journal of Black Studies. However, this was a misnomer from the beginning, but we couldn't say it was a misnomer because it was also a political term. And the politics of the term was that we were in these major universities after the death of Martin Luther King Jr. We were in these major universities, and what they were teaching us was white studies. Everybody was white. All the political sciences, all the psychologists, all the historians, everybody you study was white, dead white men, not even white women. White men, dead white men were the people who were being studied. So we said, wait a minute, there has to be, come on, there are other people in the world. Where are the Chinese? Where are the You know, the Japanese, there are all kinds of people. Where are the Mexicans? Where are the indigenous people? There are other people in the world. So we said, no, we want black studies in the university. So that was a political statement. However, over the years, there's been an evolution. And the evolution has been, wait a minute, black studies is simply one aspect of this struggle. This struggle has to be larger than this. And so that's where we then have many departments now call themselves Africana Studies. Some call themselves African American Studies. Some call themselves African World Studies, and so forth. At Temple University, we eventually evolved to a discipline concept, which is africology. Africology means basically this. It is the Afrocentric study of all African phenomena, transgenerationally and transcontinentally. That's the discipline of africology. That is unique and different. And what does that do? I'll tell you what it does. We say it is not just a study of black people. Black people have been studied for hundreds of years. And it's not that's not what we're talking about. It is the Afrocentric study of African phenomena. What is Afrocentric study? It is the study of the agency of the African people in the particular arena in which you are studying. What did the African people say? What did they do? How did they react, and so forth? That's the agency. Afrocentricity is about agency, you see? And we say transcontinentally, it could be in Mobile, Alabama, or in Lagos, Nigeria, or in Sao Paulo, Brazil. It is transcontinental. Wherever black people, African phenomena is, that's what we do. What generation? Could be in Nile Valley civilization, 2500 BC, or it could be 2024 here in Los Angeles. That kind of thing. That's what we were taught. So it's a discipline. Now, what does that allow? It also allows us to say, if you are from Jamaica, you don't have to worry. We are interested in the African experience in Jamaica. If you are from Colombia in South America, we're interested in that experience, you see. We're interested in, and these are all recent African phenomena. But we could even make it, as we have done now at Temple University, there are some people in Asia who say, you know, we're from Cambodia, and we have a relationship with Africa in our history and in our DNA. So we're interested in that too, because that's part of Homo sapiens. That's part of the human experience and diaspora and migration and so forth, you see? So all those things become possible if you talk about Afrocentricity and you talk about africology as a discipline. But if you don't talk about africology as a discipline and you talk about it as African American studies, you're talking about what I call the 1619 Project only. You're starting about Africans being enslaved in America, and you can't just do that. Or if you say Africana, we didn't use Africana because it sounds very much like the Boer word Africana in South Africa. We didn't want to call it Africana studies, you see. And we didn't want to say African studies because that normally limits it to the continent of Africa. But africology would allow you Africa, South America, North America, wherever African people are, you see.
I just really love that your work doesn't limit us to the story of slavery. It's
absolutely
the story of the entire breadth of humanity. And you really, in the book, you even talk about how, like, at the core, none of these African countries, and in all of Africa, as huge as places, have this concept of, like, you're darker and you're lighter.
Right.
So that's all constructed later. Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, I remember hearing one of your talks, and maybe you didn't say it this way, but I remember you saying, like, you've been all around the world, and in Africa you'll find in African universities, but you won't find African scholars or African philosophers being taught at those universities, and that made me go, wow.
This is a big issue. Yeah, it's a very big issue, and it's a very dangerous issue for the African continent. It is, and I've had this debate just as 2 years ago in Yaoundé in Cameroon. I was a keynote speaker for African Cultural Conference, and they brought people from many different countries together. And I said, I've traveled throughout this continent. I have never seen an African university. I have seen Western universities in Africa with African people teaching Western information, but I've never seen an African university. I've never seen African people dream of what an African university could be like. And so the vice chancellor at one of these universities, Vice President Kanga from University of South Africa, did say that what he wanted me to do was to come and spend a week at his university talking to each college, College of Agriculture, College of Law, College of Arts and Sciences, and talk to them about how they could Afrocentricize their colleges. And I've never had that experience anywhere, and it was a remarkable experience for them and for me, because I then understood that their problem is just as deep as our problems over here. I mean, you only can teach what you know, and you can only know what people teach you. So what people taught them, that's what they knew. And that's what they were teaching their students, you see. But they never thought. I mean, one guy at the College of Agriculture said to me, he says, but the books that we're using come from England, but about the theories of agriculture. He said, well, how do we change this? I said, first of all, go talk to your grandparents. They farmed. Study their techniques. You don't have to use the European techniques unless somehow you see that they are similar, but you need to first of all know what are your techniques. Then then you get beautiful things like this Zulu professor who writes a book on the relationship between Zulu mathematics and the ancient Egyptian, the Kemetic or ancient Egyptian mathematical systems. Zulu and ancient Egyptian never would have conceived of if you were going to school in the United States. But this, because he's now trying to do an Afrocentric thing where he's asking, what is the agency of my people? What have the Zulu people thought about this? Then you get a different thing.
Wow. Well, we are coming up here on time here very soon. So what I would ask you is, Dr. Asante, when you're not giving giving your knowledge to the world, when you're not writing, when you're not teaching, what do we find you doing? What do you do to relax or to kind of, take some of this off your mind?
Well, I got a beautiful wife.
Yeah.
We just we just walk along the beach.
Yeah.
No, we walk along the beach.
Yeah.
No, I write poetry. And I am a poet, and I paint sometimes.
Yeah.
I haven't done it in a while, but I paint, and I like playing basketball.
Awesome.
So I mean,
those are all great things.
Yeah.
I want you to know you are a very inspirational figure to me. I think to many people in this room, to many people here at Sage, people across the world. And I just want to thank you for coming in. I want to thank everyone who helped make this happen. I want to thank Anna and facilities and IT for helping us put everything together. Thank you, Blaze, for bringing Dr. Asante here. And just, thank you for being a part of the Sage family. Because like I said, I've been here 11 years, and I think I was telling someone the other day is that I love this company because this idea of continual education kind of runs through everything we do. And I feel like only this could we have someone like you come in and continuously kind of provide education in addition to the many other people that we've had in the past.
Sage is my home, and Sage.
Yep.
Sage, you're responsible for and I must say this, and you must know this also, and always believe it. Sage is responsible for the emergence of africology as a discipline. It is through Sage that africology becomes a significant discipline in the American Academy, and I think eventually around the world.
Wow.
I mean, so I think that that's a key. That's a key
man, son.
contribution. Gian
Can
has.
I have I don't want to take a left turn, but do I have a minute? to
Yes,
talk about?
absolutely.
Because Dr. Asante and I have had so many conversations. I don't know how many of you know me, but I have been working with Dr. Asante in Universal Right Publications as one of SAGE's DEI efforts. So I wanted to turn the conversation a little bit about to that.
Yes.
Because, and how much, and I have shared this with you, this book has helped me not only understand but guide me and define what it is that I would like to do and what SAGE can do to achieve their DEI goals, not only internally but externally in the academy, and also in producing books that can be Afrocentric and Black-centric. And one of the things that you talk about this is like, is the fact that, okay, if we are all human beings, right, and one day we get to the place where blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes is no different than dark skin, yellow skin, white skin, right?
Yeah.
How do we build a culture then that represents who we are as people? And you talk about that in this book with Mott, which is the principles of humanity. What is humanity, right?
That's right.
And so it's, what it has inspired me is like, what am I trying to build? And this book helped me understand that. Not only the work behind DEI, but what it is that I'm working towards. And I would love for you to share with everyone
Thank you.
what you have shared.
Thank you very much, Gian. I think it's a very, very, very great question. And I want to say this, that the word ma'at, and we use that word in the book, in this book, being human being, and we're trying to transform the race discourse. But ma'at is the most ancient ethical concept that we know about in history. And it means, it's translated in English as 7 different things: truth, righteousness, justice, order, harmony, balance, and reciprocity. Those 7 things. So what we work for as human beings is shared culture. We work for a culture that emphasizes those principles, and those are the principles of Ma'at. We call it Ma'aticity. We're looking toward Ma'aticity. We want to embrace these ideas. So what we're looking for, instead of phenotypical differences, do we have the same culture? That's what do we share similarly about these things, about human dignity? If we share those things, then you can build a society on the basis of culture. So culture, for us, trumps the notion of race. And it should be very clear to us. I always tell people, Justice Clarence Thomas and I come from the same part of Georgia. And he is a black man in the race construct. But there's a difference between me and Clarence Thomas, you know, because the culture is different. And culture is extremely important. And I don't mean culture on the things like we sing and dance the same thing. Do we have ma'at? Do you believe in the same notion of human dignity? Do you believe in the same notion of truth, righteousness, justice, order, harmony, balance, and reciprocity that I do? If we do, then we share there's a commonality there. And I can find that among white people, so-called white people, so-called yellow people, brown people. I can find that among different people. And then I can find bad things among all people, regardless of their phenotypes, you see, and regardless of their genders, you see. So this is very important. It's a culture thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Gianni. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Asante.
you.
This
Thank
has
you very
been
much.
wonderful. This has been great.